I am Gregory Q. Jenkins, and this is the Quintasia Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We have another special guest today that I'd like to tell you a little bit about. I happen to have met this person. We participated together in a networking group, as I often do. It gives me an opportunity to meet interesting new people. And one of the members of the networking group that I'm a part of suggested that I meet this person, and we got to talking. We found out that we have lots of similar interests, and I found out about what she's working on, and of course I told her about Quintasia Studios and what we're all about. So I thought it would be a good idea to have her on board for today's discussion. So let me tell you about our guest today. Jeanette's work as a journalist and broadcaster has taken her from Texas, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and New York. Lenoir's background includes her work as a communications director in Congress, an anchor, a reporter, producer, and talk show host. In 2004, she was recognized for her outstanding service to the 25th Congressional District of Texas. In 2012, she won a New York State Broadcasters Association Award for Best Spot News and was selected as YWCA Outstanding Woman of the Year in Arts and Communications. Please welcome to the Quintasia Podcast, Jeanette Lenoir.
Thank you. Sounds like a lot, but yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us today. And we'd like to take this opportunity to, we're going to talk a little bit about you and your background, and then we're going to learn more about what you've been doing. So why don't you tell me a little bit about where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in a couple of places actually. So I'm originally from Suriname, and Suriname is a small former Dutch colony on the northeast coast in South America. And so I moved to the United States when I was 13 years old, and learned how to speak English. I grew up speaking Dutch and Surinamese and my tribal language, Pamaka. And because I'm a Pamaka person, I'm a member of I'm a descendant of an African tribe that was brought over during the African diaspora, and were taken to Suriname. And my ancestors are the ones who jumped off the slave ships and ran into the jungles of Suriname, or South America, so to speak, and were able to establish their own society. I am one of 5 remaining African tribes that call that region home. So there's Pamaka. I am a Pamaka person. There's Samaka, Utica, Matawai, and Aluku. And so we call, in Suriname, we call it the Binnenland. So we call the interior of the country our home. So that's where I'm from. Moved to the U.S. at 13. Grew up in Houston, Texas. Went to military boarding school in Boonville, Missouri, Kemper Military Boarding School. From there, I grew up in Houston, so to speak, until I started working professionally.
Now, how did you make the transition? And I think, if I'm knowing your chronology correctly, I think you went from working in Congress and then you became a journalist, or were you a journalist first?
I was a journalist. I've been a journalist for a while. I would have to say, I studied journalism in school. I've always studied journalism, and so when I went to Congress, I was working in the mayor's office in Houston, Texas first, under Mayor Brown's administration. From there, a councilman, Chris Bell, became a congressman. And so I moved to Washington, D.C. to work for him, and I became his executive assistant. And I was assisting him in media because he knew how much I loved working with media. It was my dream, my pursuit. It's like, I want to be a journalist. I want to be a news anchor. I want to be a storyteller and so forth. So they all knew it, and so they allowed me to be a part of the media team that he had at the time. So from there, he did not win re-election, and so I decided to go back to school. I went to American University, and I started working at WAMU. And that was a great experience. From there, I decided to move to upstate New York so I can do the transition. I can work from in radio and try to break my way into television. That's always the idea or the advice that you're given by veterans to say, go to a small town and work your way up, and you can learn your ropes and cut your teeth that way. So that's why I decided to go from DC after we did not win re-election, and I wanted to break into television. So I decided to go to Utica area, upstate New York, so I can make that transition and also take part in some other. I went to Utica College also to finish my degree there. So that's what I did. And so I started working. I went back into radio in upstate New York, WIBX, Town Square Media. I worked for them. And I was the first Black woman this is a small town in Marcy, New York, very small town. I just could not I could not get them to hire me at the only television station in that town in Utica. But I was able to get a job. They needed a reporter for this television station, this radio station, and so I was able to get that job, and I was the first Black woman they'd hired full time in their almost 90 plus year history.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, it's a Fox News affiliate. You have like 3 hours of Glenn Beck, 3 hours of Sean Hannity, 3 hours of Rush Limbaugh. It was, it's pretty conservative town, and they're very much into. They say there are 2 types of New Yorks. There's downstate and there's upstate. And downstate, they're more liberal. Upstate is very conservative. And so that's where I landed. Not even thinking, this is where the whole culture comes in. I wasn't even thinking about what it meant to be a Black woman pursuing this career. I didn't think about that. I was a single mother. I was, with I had my son. I had to make sure he was okay. I had to pursue this dream. I just had this desire to chase this dream, which was to become a television news anchor. That's what I was doing. I didn't think about, I'm a Black woman or this. I knew these things existed, but I didn't really think about it. I thought that if I worked hard, I would achieve my goals. And no matter what, just work hard. That's what it means to be an American. At least those were the ideals that I grew up with for understanding when I came to the United States and got to know America. So going to upstate New York and realizing that being a Black person it was my Achilles heel. It was a problem for me. So it really shaped my view of what it means to be an American, and which is what led to me creating this online magazine called pluribus America. So that's really where I'm coming from.
And that's a great segue into where we are present day, and we can talk a little bit more about pluribus America. I want to just take this quick little break, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Quintasia Podcast, and coming up next, we're going to have our CTO, who's going to be asking Jeanette some more questions. Take it away, Harv Lacko.
You can tell us a little about the mission.
It is pluribus America because of the culture shock I went through going to upstate New York and realizing that I was in a different America. I was treated differently. The segregation that I witnessed, the level of poverty and how people live, how they treat each other, the cultural stigmas that still impact certain groups of people. I was really, really shocked. It really blew my mind. So I wanted to talk about it. So I created this platform to talk about America, the United States. We talk about us being the United States of America, But if you were to go, depending on where you are in America, you'll be an outsider as an American in your own country. And through that experience, I wanted to create a platform that not only talks about our differences, but our commonalities and the things that keep us stagnant and unable to overcome some major issues that have to be overcome and have to be confronted in an honest way, so that way we can eventually become the United States of America, one people, one nation under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. That's the illusion we're currently living with. That is not the truth. That is not the experience that we have. So let's make that illusion a reality. And that is going to take a lot of honest work, a lot of honest and deliberate work to push that agenda along. We've come a long way. We have more ways to go. If you look at what happened in the Capitol over the past week, that tells you what we are facing in this country when it comes to race relations. They're not fighting over the infrastructure of this country. They're not fighting over the fact that people are poor and unable to get good working jobs. They're not fighting over the fact that they're arguing against $15 minimum wage. They're not fighting over the fact that they don't have health care. They're fighting over the fact that they want to fly their Confederate flag and they want to worship a man who doesn't even see them as human beings. His track record is very clear. And that is the depravity. That is where we're at. So in many ways, as awful as Donald Trump and his family has been to shaping a certain American culture, he's also opened our eyes and showed a mirror to what we are dealing with. A lot of this has been around. It's just been hidden. We've become this PC culture as well. You have to be very careful. But that's right there. And that's why we're still in an unequal world trying to call each other Americans. But there's a lot of animosity. So E Pluribus America is a place where we can talk about these things with solutions in mind, but talk about them honestly, because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is a country where we all feel good in, a world where we all feel good in. If we're the beacon of democracy and hope for all, then there's time that we actually show that it has to be real and not just an illusion. So I hope E Pluribus America can help facilitate that. I know a lot of other media outlets are out there and a lot of other people are doing their part, but these are just my hands on deck. So yeah.
So in terms of the work and the network and the members of E Pluribus America, where would I find it? How would I find it? Or do you have events, scheduled events? Do you have publications? I mean, how do I find more out about E Pluribus America?
E Pluribus America is online at epluribusamerica.com. And I have some contributors. Again, it's an American culture magazine, so it's very broad. So we can talk about a lot of things. I don't want to talk about just the things that we separate on. I also want to talk about things that we have in common. For example, jazz. In America we celebrate. April is Jazz Month. There's always something to celebrate. There's so much good in the world and in this country. So I want to highlight those things too. But beyond just what are people doing for Jazz Month in Harlem, or in New Orleans, but what are people doing for Jazz Month in Native American place, like where Native Americans live, or Wyoming, or Bismarck, or the most other parts of America that don't get a shine. We don't really talk about. They're not mainstream. Let's go beyond the mainstream and get to know our small communities, and hopefully get them to play a role in shaping our identity as a nation of people.
Now, in terms of Utica, when you started the site, was there a particular area that you were focused on and you trialed? And give us a little background about where you started from, and where you are now. And it's sort of, I'm not asking specifically, but what are some of the things that work to bring people together, and how has that evolved a little bit from when you first launched and where you are now?
Yeah. The very first story that I wrote was titled, Is Trump the New Synonym for the N-Word? And the reason why I wrote that was my very first story. And again, E Pluribus America was born out of the pain that I was experiencing in this small town. I was facing deep discrimination. It was terrible what they were doing. I was an anchor, a radio anchor for them. I was, part of a talk show. So it creates this, people feel that they have a right to attack you. I mean, there's so many horrible names and things done to me to try to, hurt me professionally. And a lot of it was just racial and terrible. So that's where this all comes from. So the very first article I wrote was I went to one of my favorite spots. One of my favorite. It's a upscale resale shop in a little town, Clinton. Love this. I've been going there for years since I've been living there. I've even put clothes on consignment there. So this one time I go there, I did not like the way the owner's husband treated me. He was very aggressive in trying to get information out of me. He wanted to know what I was doing now. I was no longer working on the radio. What was I doing? What was happening to my son? I heard your son had. He was saying a lot of gossip that I become accustomed to, and I really didn't appreciate it. And I was just like, wow, I feel attacked in a way. I was shopping and he was watching everything I was doing. I felt like I was shopping while black, and I felt offended by it because I'd been a customer for such a long time, and I couldn't shake it. So the next day I was so annoyed, like, why would he do that to me? And he did it to me in front of other customers. I felt violated. So I was like, I'm going to talk to the owner, the woman who I normally deal with, about this. So after work, I was teaching. I went there. I'm still in my teaching clothes, and I went there and I said, "Hey, I just want to." There was a couple in there, but they were in the back. But I wanted to be very quiet and not. But I just wanted to share my heart with her and let her know that I was hurt. So I said, "Hey, this is what your husband did to me yesterday." And she immediately took defense. She says, "I don't believe it." I'm like, "No, really, he really did this." And I felt really violated by that. I really don't want him to question me like that anymore. I just want to, if I come here, I want to shop. I don't want personal questions like that. He would never do that. He's not that type of person. She took total defense. And I said, "You know what? That's okay. I just won't shop here again." She goes, "You don't have to. Get out, Trump, 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 Trump. That's why we voted for Trump, Trump, Trump." And I'm like, shocked.
Wow.
I am not, I'm looking at the couple. There's a white couple in the store. They look, but they're pretending that they just want to be flies on the wall. They're like, "Oh my God." And so I'm walking backwards. I'm scared to death thinking, she's like, she's calling the cops. She says she's calling the cops. And she's chanting Trump. And I'm like, "How do you know? I didn't vote for Trump. Why are you chanting Trump?" You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just shocked. I just couldn't believe it that this woman was chanting Trump at me. So I was like, I was shaking. I left the store, went into my car, shaking, thinking, "Oh my God, I hope that I don't get pulled over. I don't get attacked or thrown on the ground." I'm thinking, I'm still dressed. I've got heels on. I'm literally envisioning being slammed to the ground by, the local police officer, because this woman is yelling and chanting Trump at me. I was shaken. So I went home and I wrote about it. It created, people actually, there's some people, especially there's some local activists and some students there from Hamilton University, Hamilton College. they all came out and they spoke up against that. I wasn't around for it, but it was really shocking to me to experience that. So that was my first article, and that's ultimately the belly button of E Pluribus America. You know.
So,
Wow.
I was going to ask you, and I had a sneaky suspicion that there were going to be people in the local community. It seems that wherever we're in a community, there's different demographics, and it's never as if there's no one that doesn't think in the same way that you do. But in terms of cultivating the community, did you actually reach out to those people who came to your assistance, not assistance isn't the word, but actually joined E Pluribus America and try to cultivate and build that community? And were you able to grow it?
Well, I'm still growing it. It's still an active work in
No.
progress.
I meant specifically, was it Clinton that you said, the town of Clinton?
Yes, I did not. I didn't reach out to anybody to speak up on my behalf or anything. I just happened to. I just wrote about my experience there, and so when the people read my article, it was shared on social media. And to the town itself, it went. I don't want to say viral, but the town went up, and so people reacted to that, and that was such a great sign of the fact that there's more good than bad in the world. There really is. There are people in the world who think negatively of others, who don't want to live communally, who don't see the human race as one people, or you know what I mean. There's still bad people in the world, but they're more good than bad. And so these people showing up and speaking out against this person's behavior was very, very eye-opening, and I appreciated it, because that's not what I was experiencing living there. I mean,
I was thinking along the lines that, when there is an injustice such as that,
Mhm.
and there are some portions of the population that just don't want to get involved, even if they do support you, they're afraid that they will become targets themselves. Have you run across that at all in sort of those
Yeah,
neighborhoods or
actually,
areas?
it's so funny. One time I was asked to be a panelist during this event that was put together by the NAACP, and I believe another local group, maybe Kirkland Democrats or something. But in any event, one of the audience members spoke up, and she said she was just middle-aged white woman who's lived in Utica her whole life, and she was like, I hear my family say, she's like, I'm not like that. I don't say those words. I don't call people the N-word, whatever, or hold these views, but my family does, and they say, what can I do? And so I think, just like we've all been advised, when you see something, say something. That whole thing applies too. When that's how you get into good trouble, as the late Congressman said. You got to get into good trouble even in your own home, even if it means saying, "Hey, we shouldn't talk about that. We shouldn't call those people that name." So I've definitely seen that.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanette. I'm going to turn it back over to Greg, and really insightful, and I wish you very much continued luck in growing your community, and we're happy to have you as part of the Quintasia community as well. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wanted to just quickly say to our listeners who maybe didn't join at the top of the podcast, I am Gregory Q. Jenkins from Quintasia Studios, and this is the Quintasia Podcast. We are talking today with Jeanette Lenoir, and what a conversation that we're having. In this next segment, if you will, what I kind of want to focus on is what E Pluribus America focuses on, as you said earlier, which is culture. So this will be more of a, just a discussion on. Before we jump into that, there is one thing that I would like to say to anyone who happens to come upon this this podcast. there isn't more, at least in my view, there isn't more evil today than there ever has been in the world. It's just that evil gets better press coverage. So you need to you
true.
just need to remember that. Yes, I think many people of color, we've had unfortunately similar um, events that have happened in our lives, but I can also recount to you surprisingly unexpected acts of kindness from people who were not people of color. So both exist in our world, and I think sometimes we need to remember that. And what we want to do, of course, is encourage more of the good events and see if we can lessen the bad events. And the reason why I bring that up is I think culture, which is an amalgamation of a number of things that make us who we are, um, speaking as Americans who we are, has a big role to play in that. And I want to talk a little bit about, when we talk about defining what American culture is, this is why it is important that it is a diverse and inclusive culture, because it sets the expectation. It sets, if you have diversity and you have inclusion, then people understand and accept that all of this belongs. We all have a place. There's no if you're American, this is your country, and you are part of what makes this country, and you are not an afterthought. You are a vital component of this country. But we need to see that reflected in the culture, because if you don't see that reflected in the culture, the message that comes out is you are not a part of this country. You are not an integral part of the makeup, and you are not important. And that is why, we at Quintasia, we are focused on really, really trying to do all that we can to make sure that the media and entertainment industries reflect, the true diversity of this country. So I will start with that premise, and I'll ask you, Jeanette, to lend your thoughts to that ideal.
Well, you know what? That's important. We all deserve to just tell our own stories. Entertainment and media is so powerful, right? You're the mouth. You tell the story. You can't tell my story like I can tell my story. I can't tell Greg's story like Greg can tell his story. We all have our own stories to tell, and we all have our own unique experiences, and it matters in the bigger storytelling, in the bigger format. It just matters. It matters in mainstream media, and it matters otherwise as well. So I'm all on board with that. And again, that's why E Pluribus America exists, because we all deserve a voice. And this goes along with even larger issues like net neutrality. Who has access to information? How do we keep the internet not just free, but accessible to everybody? So this matters on so many different levels. So and that's why, and it's also part of documenting. You don't have, there's mainstream media, and then there's alternative media. Okay, so I am that alternative media. And a great example of this alternative media that turns into, we all want to grow, obviously, I do too, but Huffington Post is a great example of this alternative media that has grown, but it comes from the same concept that even Quintasia Studios is on a mission to do, is just making it community, local, connected outreach, and then through that it grows because it's beneficial. So yeah, that's the idea, and if we don't do that, then we miss out on an opportunity to tell our own stories. We miss out on the opportunities to connect people and to document our stories. We have to document what is happening around us, to us, because each of us, each group has a different viewpoint, a different experience. Somebody who's living in the hood in America is experiencing this pandemic different than somebody who's living, you know, in Beverly Hills. You know, I mean, they're experiencing this difference. That you have the Kardashians saying, "Oh, we've had to suffer for 2 weeks of quarantine to be able to go on this private island," and you know, quarantine in 2020, right? You know, you're just like, and then there's these people who are like, we've had one stimulus check. We're in a pandemic, and our government, we're actually having to not just stick together, but stick together in poverty. You know,
And the food banks are running low on food. I mean, it's very real in this world, in this day and age, to think that people don't have enough food to eat and are worried, you know, how to pay for their bare essentials.
They're food lines. They're food lines from New York to Texas.
Absolutely.
You know, but you know, there seems again the illusion of America takes over, and that's why it's important for Quintasia Studios and E Pluribus America to really to highlight these other stories that are also taking place in the midst of what's happening around us. And it's true, a lot of people are benefiting. Look at how they're talking about how Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're the richest people. You know, that's like there's this whole part of national dialogue that is like, oh, the economy is doing good, that these people are doing great, and you know, all the pandemic is actually benefiting people, just like war benefits certain people. You know, like this is boom for them, and you're just like, where's the humanity in all of this? Where is it? You know, it's a really sad state of affair, you know, when we look across the world and see who's benefiting from the pandemic and who's not. And it's directly correlated to who has a voice and who does not, and who gets to have access, who does not, who gets to tell their own stories, who does not. I mean, you know, even when it comes to fun things, you know, like food programs, look at, you know, who can you think of? You think of Anthony Bourdain, God rest his soul, but George Zimmerman, or, you know, there's all these, you know, all these, no, you know, no offense, all these white guys they still lead the narrative. You know what I mean? That you don't really see diversity in pop culture either, even though the influence of that pop culture comes from these same people who don't have a voice. So it's imperative that we continue to tell these stories and continue to highlight the inequality across the board.
And that's definitely gets to the heart of you know, what we are about at Quintasia. One, I will say that I don't, activism is too strong of a word, but what I want to impress upon people is you don't, particularly people of color, but this affects everybody. But you know, specifically, I would say this message is for people of color, is that you don't need permission to tell your story. If you think that your story is important, go and tell it. You know, don't worry about, well, who's gonna, you know, resonate. Tell your story, because you never know. One thing is for sure, no one will ever know it if you don't tell it. And you definitely have to go out there and feel like you belong. Don't let anyone take that away from you, or say that your story isn't important. And you have a right to tell and own your own story.
Yes.
So, you know, and that's what we're about here. We're and you know, getting different perspectives, and that's why I think it's this is how we learn. When we, you know, I hear things, we think things are all monolithic, and because we're Black, we all have the same experiences. Your experience, Jeanette, is different from my experience because you you came to this. We've come to intersect in the same time and space, but how we got there, our journey to that place, was different. And
Yes.
that journey, that different journey, has an impact. So we have different perspectives. So even within, it's not just color, it's experiences. And if we learn to be inclusive, life will be better for us. But that's a lesson that I hope we as human beings will learn. And the other thing that I want to impress upon people is, you have to take responsibility to make that happen. You can't sit back and wish, oh, it'd be nice if the world was really that way. Well, it's never going to be that way unless you do something actively to make it so. And that's what we all have to get into our heads. Definitely, agree. And my hope for this country is that, we take all of these things to heart, that we make this not because somebody told us to do it, but because we collectively as a people realize, you know what, this matters. And if we want a safe and stable country, this is the path to that. We have to look at our culture and make sure that we're being inclusive to all to
Yeah.
all of the things that make up our culture, that we highlighted, we celebrated, and that hopefully we get to the point. Not hopefully, we will work towards to the point when we get to the point where all will feel welcome and will feel like they are a part, of this great fabric. And I think we all have to be dedicated to making sure our great experiment, continues, because
Right.
this week it almost ended. So we should definitely keep that in mind. I I have enjoyed our conversation so much. We hope that you will come back. We'll definitely, for those of you who are interested in learning more about E Pluribus America, when we put out the podcast, we will also have a link, to E Pluribus America, so you can go there and learn more about it. My name is Gregory Q. Jenkins. I'm from Quintasia Studios, and you have been listening to the Quintasia podcast. I hope that if you enjoyed our conversation, I hope that you will subscribe on however you are listening to us, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, on Google, on Spotify, or if you watched us on YouTube or Facebook. We hope you will subscribe and keep coming back. Thank you, everybody. Take care, be well, and we'll see you next time.